If getting rid of all of your friends didn't work by not being present for them, tearing them down with your words, or getting them to make bad decisions, then you'll want to stick around to complete our 4-step program on how to be a bad friend, as we're going to help you ditch your friends for eternity, coming right up. Romans 10:13 and 14 says, "For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching?" Right from the Bible itself, we learn that people don't receive salvation if nobody is going to tell them about the gospel. So whatever you do, don't share Jesus with others. Now, some of you may think, okay, I just won't go knocking door to door asking people if they have a moment to talk about Jesus. But that isn't enough. There are many subtle ways that you can actually do this without thinking about it. To get you to see what I'm talking about, we'll look at Jonah, who was perhaps the worst follower of God ever. Now, some of you who grew up in Promised Land may remember the name as the guy who was swallowed by a big fish. And you may be wondering, what does this guy's story have to do with teaching me on how to be a bad friend? Well, he didn't have any friends in this story, but he was certainly not very friendly, as you will soon find out. He also went out of his way to not share God with others, and that is what I want to highlight to you today. So, without further ado, here are my final 3 tips on how to be a bad friend and not share Jesus with others. Now, you see, the most ironic part of Jonah's story is that he was a prophet, which meant that his job was literally to tell people messages from God. He did this job among other people who followed God until one day God told him that he wanted him to go take a message to a place called Nineveh. Now, Nineveh was known as an idolatrous, proud, and ruthless nation. To go there and preach God's message might have meant opposition, judgment, and maybe even danger. So Jonah came up with a different plan. He hopped aboard a ship going the complete opposite direction. And this brings me to my first point. When it comes to sharing Jesus with people, run from every opportunity. It doesn't matter how small or big it is. Whether you are tempted to pray for your meal in front of your friends, or someone asks you a pointed question about what God is like, it could very quickly open doors to others knowing about Christ. You don't want that kind of attention in the first place, but you especially don't want the other side of the coin either. Like Jonah knew, there is a good chance someone may not see eye to eye with your answers or your actions. So why make that additional drama for yourself? Whenever a situation arises, run the opposite direction. Do an eyes open, mental, while you're chewing your food prayer so that no one notices. If a friend asks about that event we posted on Instagram, change the subject. And if someone around you is crying, struggling, or broken, don't start any conversations with them that may lead you to talking about how God is your strength. Follow Jonah's action and run from every opportunity. Well, of course, the most well-known part of the story happens next. He gets thrown overboard, gets swallowed by this huge fish, and he ends up going to Nineveh to do the job. But then another great twist happens. After just one day of walking around telling the Ninevites that they had 40 days to turn from their sins or to burn in hell, they all start repenting at the drop of a hat. And at Jonah 4:1, it says this, "But to Jonah, this seemed very wrong, and he became very angry. He then proceeds to argue with God, saying that he knew God would pull something like this off, and that it was a waste of his time. He couldn't find it within himself to be joyful for the lives that would be saved. He didn't praise God for moving an entire nation out of its sin. And he ends up being more concerned about a plant, which we'll get to in a moment, than anything else. This is because he didn't care for the well-being of others. He may have actually preferred to see the fire and brimstone rain down on Nineveh for how undeserving he felt the Ninevites were. We don't know, but we definitely did know that he did not care about what would be the best for them. And that should be your goal as well. If you're not wanting others to know about Jesus, then my second point is this. Don't want what's best for them. Proverbs 27:6 says, "Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses." Let me unpack that a bit. A friend will tell someone a difficult truth that may hurt, but they do that in order to make them a better person. If they have a really annoying habit they are not aware of, for example, have horrible breath, or need to know that the one girl that he really likes actually can't stand him, they need to know. And it's going to feel like a wound. And it's not going to be easy for you to tell them either. But a friend has got to do what friends do. Of course, we aren't about making friends in this series, so we will just take the other option. But what does the proverb mean about multiplying kisses? What this expression means is that you will deny those habits and let them continue to be that way. When they ask, "Do I have bad breath?" you say, "No, you smell great." And when he tries to flirt with that girl that he likes and she ignores him, remind him that she's just playing hard to get. Now, we can take this same principle over to the spiritual realm. If someone feels guilty over something they've done, don't tell them about the forgiveness open to them in Christ. Feed them some baloney about how what they did isn't actually as bad as what other people do. If you have a friend who is becoming more captive to a sinful addiction every day, don't speak out about their sin, because each person has the right to do whatever brings them pleasure in this life. If there's anything that may benefit others spiritually, but it could be at some kind of cost to you, be selfish and don't do it. Be like Jonah and don't want what is best for others. So finally, Jonah decides that he's just going to go cool off on the side of a hill. While this was more metaphorically speaking, God actually provided him with some shade to physically cool off. Out of nowhere, God made this leafy plant just pop up to give Jonah some relief. And it says that Jonah was happy about it. But apparently he got too attached to it, because the next day it withers up and it dies. And he starts to throw another tantrum about it. In Jonah 4, he actually says 3 different times that he would rather be dead. He would rather have death than anything to do with God. Think about Jonah for a moment. God has selected him to hear from God himself directly. God gave him an important job that would bring God glory and would help others be saved. God miraculously saved him from drowning in a terrible storm by being swallowed by a giant fish. Then God provides shelter to Jonah when none was present when he is on the top of that hill. And what was his response? Was he thankful in any way? Nope, not at all. And that is exactly how your outlook needs to be if you want to fail in reaching people for God. Lastly, live a life lacking in gratitude towards God. If we don't want people signing up for God's team, then we need to make it look like a losing one. Don't ever spend time publicly proclaiming that you are thankful for how the Lord has blessed you. In fact, do the opposite. Complain about what you have been given. Whine about what others have in comparison to you, and post on Instagram that life just plain sucks. It will grab people's attention, make people feel bad for you, and they will either think you are a hypocrite or that God isn't there for you. And either way, it keeps God from being known. Well, all right, enough with the sarcasm. Sadly, we are all a lot like Jonah, though you may never be called to another country, and I hope you never get swallowed by a massive fish, whale, who knows. But we all do the same, and we all make the same mistakes as Jonah. We run from every opportunity. We don't want what's best for others, and we live a life lacking in gratitude towards God. Why? Because we worry what others may do or think if we actually are so open about sharing about God. It's our job to represent Jesus to those who are suffering, though. Paul says this in 2 Corinthians. But thanks be to God who uses us to spread the aroma of the knowledge of him everywhere. the pleasing aroma of Christ among those who are being saved and those who are perishing. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. To put this in words that I once heard someone else say, you may be the only Jesus someone ever meets. In a world so full of terrible things and uncommitted Christians, there is a sea of people just drowning in sin and despair. You may be the only person with a life preserver to come along their way. Are you going to sail right on by, or are you going to take the chance, however little it may be, to be Christ's ambassador? Are you going to be a bad friend who doesn't care for their eternal well-being, or are you going to be a true friend? Here's a final truth for you. Sharing Jesus with your friends means that you're aligned with Jesus. John 15:5 says Jesus calls us friends, and that is why he has entrusted so much to us, but that comes with real expectations. In Matthew 10:32-33, it says, so everyone who acknowledges me before men, I also acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I also deny before my Father who is in heaven. So, where do you go from here? Do you need to work on your relationship with Jesus? Have you ever even had a relationship with Jesus? Do you need to grow in your ability to share the gospel with your friends? Let's dig more into this as we move into our small groups. Here are your discussion questions for today. Share an instance when you were afraid to tell someone a hard truth. What was difficult and why did you feel that way? What did you end up doing and why? Now, secondly, which of Jonah's 3 actions do you think is most common among your peers? Why is that? And which one of these is the hardest for you? What does the expression, you may be the only Jesus someone ever meets means? And lastly, share what are your fears about being open about your faith. Have you ever shared the gospel with someone else? How did that make you feel when you shared the gospel with them? And what did you learn about God in that moment? Can you imagine what your small group would have been like without a committed counselor like the one that you have right now? To be there for you every weekend, to show up when being on Zoom and Hangouts is exhausting, to invest in you, to pray for you, to point you to the gospel. Well, we're going to thank and celebrate our counselors on Sunday, May 6th at 1 p.m. over Zoom. We want to do this through 2 primary ways. First, by sharing how they've shaped and influenced you over the past year, and second, by giving them a gift. You'll have a maximum of 8 minutes to share with everyone how your counselor has been amazing over the past year. As a small group, you'll need to do a few things. First, make sure you have each other's email addresses so you can plan for counselor appreciation together. Second, plan and prepare what you'd like to say to express your appreciation to your counselor. You can make a video, a presentation, something else, or just share in the moment. And third, you need to come up with a gift idea that would be meaningful for your counselor to receive from you as a small group. Now, remember, your counselor can buy anything you might purchase them, but they can't buy something meaningful that only you as a small group can give to them. It doesn't have to be costly, though I'm sure they wouldn't be opposed to it. It just needs to be meaningful and personal. Now, if you have 2 counselors, you should prepare 2 gifts. Then decide who is going to do what and to buy what, and make sure everyone pays evenly. You still have a number of weeks to prepare. I'm excited to see everyone gather together to see and hear how you've been blessed by your counselor this year at Counselor Appreciation. Hey there again. I hope today's lesson drives the simple truth deeper that the most important thing we can ever do as a friend is to openly share about Jesus and the profound impact Jesus has had on your life. And as we step back and we think about all the ways we could be bad friends, like not being present, tearing your friends down with your words, or getting them to make bad decisions, I hope you've been inspired to be the best example of Jesus to your friends as you can be. And for many of your friends, you are the closest representation to Jesus they may ever experience. Don't take that privilege and responsibility lightly. I pray that no matter how you get to connect with your friends, whether it be in person, over text, or on a video call, I hope you take every opportunity to display Christ-like character and build your relationship to the point where you'll be able to share the good news of Jesus. Have a great start to your weekend, and I'll see you in the next video.